This is Guitar Business Radio, the podcast for the business of guitar. No reviews, no demos, no idle chatter, just useful dialogue and information to help you get the most out of your guitar-related business. Whether you're a guitar builder or a guitar player or just something in between, this is for you. Now, here's your host. Oh, wait, it's me, Jeffrey D. Brown. So let's get to it. From Guitar Business Media, this is episode 27 of GBR, and believe me, you won't get this anywhere else. Welcome to the show, and our special guest today is a very colorful character. He's the founder and president of LsL Instruments out here in LA, and he'll give us the very interesting backstory on the origins of his company from Berkeley to China and back. And just to be clear, LsL has never made a guitar in China, at least so far. It's an engaging interview, so stay tuned for that in just a few moments. So if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I often like to spend a little time in the front of the episode, the segment we actually call Setting the Stage, to talk about stuff that's going on here at Guitar Business Media, like our new magazine, Guitar Business, and of course, Guitar Business Daily. And by the way, our first priority has been to get the daily up and running. The site is fully built, and if I have to say so myself, it's an awesome looking site, and our main focus right now is just content, and more content. And once again, I want to state that we're interested in developing as many reliable and credible sources for guitar business-related news and information as possible. And there are several ways that works. First, we're certainly looking for more editorial contributors of all kinds. If you're an experienced writer in the music business and guitar is an interest of yours, we'd like to talk to you. If you're not an experienced writer, but you have information and knowledge about the business of guitar that could be of interest and value to our readers and listeners, we'd like to talk to you as well. If you're a guitar-related business of any kind and you have news of any kind, we'd like to hear about it. If you have an existing agency or in-house marketing people, and that's not your job, let them know about us. And if you need some help in determining what to send, just let us know, and we'll be glad to help you through it. In any case, contact us at editor@guitar.business, editor@guitar.business, no.com. Or you can call us at 888-777-2404, 888-777-2404. We'd love to hear from you. So many of you receive our weekly email newsletters about the show and other stuff. We give a good heads up on the latest episode and what's in it. And of course, it's free. All you have to do is subscribe, and you can do that right on the GBR website at guitarbusinessradio.com. Just click subscribe. And while you're there, you'll find all of our previous shows under the Episodes tab. And one nice thing about that index page is that there is a little player for each one, and you can listen right there if you want. You can also click into the official episode page where you can see the show notes and more, and listen there as well. Of course, many of you are listening on one of the many apps and sites that distribute the show, like Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Player FM, and tons more. And that's great, but if you've not visited the GBR website, you're missing out on a lot more information. So check that out when you can at guitarbusinessradio.com. And while we're waiting for you to do that, here's something completely different. So Lance Lerman is the founder and president of LsL Instruments here in the LA area. Actually way out in the valley, as it is famously known, but nonetheless in the thick of the LA music scene, if you will. And that's been a benefit for his 10-year-old guitar design and manufacturing business. And their solid reputation among name players has not hurt either. But there's a fascinating story about how all this happened, almost by accident. And we'll hear all about that and more as Lance Lerman joins us right here and right now. Well, Lance, it's great to see you today, even though I can't see you, but thanks for coming on the show.
You're better off.
Well, you know, it probably
it's great
goes
to be here. Thanks.
It goes both ways. If we were doing Skype, you'd have to look at me too as well. But look, let's let's take a look at the foundation and see what forms the building blocks of your career and your business. So let's first talk about any major influences you had growing up that had the most impact later on, and then we can get into talking about the business road that you've traveled. So what can you tell us about your early years?
Well, I started my first business in Berkeley, coincidentally enough, making guitars. I guess my biggest influence would have to be my parents, because you could immediately, first thing I did was start a business as soon as I could, because they had always been in business and they had always struggled. And somehow that rubbed off on me, or cursed me, depends on how you look at it.
Right.
That's what you do in life. You have a business.
One way or another.
So first thing I did in Berkeley, when I thought I could anyway, I started a business with a partner, Joe Dietz, and we were working we had worked at the Fifth String in Berkeley as repair guys, and I worked as Saga Musical Instruments. I was their first employee.
Now, tell us a little bit about the Fifth String before we get too far.
The Fifth String was basically an acoustic based bluegrassy kind of music store. And it was a pretty happening place back then. They'd have jams all the time that were packed, and a lot of people that have made great music careers were there, as were all over the place in Berkeley in those days.
Did you
businesses and musicians?
And so I assume you made some contacts there, and you met people and that sort of thing. Huh?
I did, but I probably didn't remember them the next day.
I understand how that goes. I understand.
It was indeed Berkeley in the mid and late 70s. And
I recall.
Yeah, it was kind of a crazy place, and a lot of drug culture.
Sure, of course.
It was also an incredible breeding ground for businesses at that time. Imaginarium, the Nature Company, the Body Shop, Pete's Coffee, Sahara Foods. These were all tiny little businesses when I was there.
Not so tiny anymore, though. A lot of them.
No, it's amazing, and North Face and Marmot Mountain Works, who's now gone, but they made it big for a while. Mm-hmm. And they were our next door neighbor in a funeral home. That's where the Fifth String was located.
Well, that's where everybody would end up. They would end up there. Is that right?
Yeah. And they had a rope pull elevator for caskets, which was a lot of fun to play with. You pulled the rope and it raised you up.
I remember those.
Slowly.
They're probably not legal anymore. They wouldn't pass code. I would imagine.
Well, nothing passes code. Come on.
So you were from the Fifth String. You said you went to work for Saga. What was that all about?
Yeah, I was Saga's first employee, and my job was to get up really early in the morning, go across the Bay Bridge and to South San Francisco, and located right near where Mythbusters was located. And that's the kind of place it was.
Sure.
And I was their first employee. My job was to fill orders, wrap them, pack them, ship them, check guitars and mandolins and banjos. And there were a lot of banjos. And at the time, I was a banjo teacher at the Fifth String, too. So, I dug the banjos. And I had to slowly, if there was something wrong, fix it or try to fix it with the limited stuff we had there. But, so I was around guitars and instruments, then fixing them or ruining them in some cases, I'm sure. But that's where, my career started at the Fifth String in Berkeley.
Sure. And then you went to Saga, but you were there.
Saga was owned by the same guys.
Oh, okay.
Saga was Richard Kelton. There were two Fifth Strings, one in San Francisco on Scott Street, and the one in Berkeley.
Right.
So, and then Richard Kelton started Saga Musical Instruments, importing really great instruments, especially at that time from mostly Japan. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Tokai made a lot of the stuff we were distributing. So I had to fix the stuff, and I became, guitar dude after a while. I thought I was.
Well, so you started to get the hang of it.
I started D&L Instruments with Joe Dietz, and
so you actually you left Saga to do that. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I did. I think it was kind of mutual.
Got it.
Because I was a hippie kid, and being there at 6 o'clock in the morning every day was not exactly my forte. And I didn't know how to be an employee.
Right.
Oh, I did, a really bad one.
Yeah.
So anywed.
So what happened with DNL? So what you guys got started there?
DNL lasted for 2 or 3 years. Joe moved away, and I ended up with it. And I moved the place to a little tiny store on Broadway, and it was just me. And I got burglarized one day, and they cleaned me out of everything.
Now, was it retail? Lance, was it retail?
I did. It was mainly just a repair shop. I didn't do any retail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, DNL kind of morphed into that because turns out running a guitar company even back then wasn't so good. And I was a kid. I didn't know how to run a business to save my life.
Yeah.
At least the first time around, but you learn.
You do.
And the burglary pretty much put me out of business. One of the worst days of my life. I walked up in the morning and I see a guitar cord under the doorway on the sidewalk. What's this? Man. And they cleaned me out. Now I had to call customers. I didn't have insurance. Lost their guitars. Yeah, it was a bad day, and sticks with me pretty good now.
Well, it's a teachable moment, I guess. I mean, in one way that we always call it.
I learned.
Yeah,
have money.
Yeah, money helps. Of course, I said a long time ago that personally I got rid of the word failure, and I just have now classified all that stuff in R&D. So you can probably do the same thing, and I'm sure you'll kind of look back and say,
you can write that off, can't you?
Well, I don't know about you can't write it off against something you didn't make, but it's a tough lesson, But if you look back, and there's always a reason that these things happen, even though it seems ludicrous at the time. How can you say that? But it's a puzzle.
Well,
it's a puzzle piece.
I learned a lot, and I learned a lot from Joe Dietz and Max Ivy, guys who taught me how to be a guitar repairman and guitar maker and woodworking. But, my first wood project was a pipe in the shape of a guitar. And it was a really nice guitar, rosewood fingerboard. You sucked on the headstock. And was
that a potential product or just a personal use item?
No. It would have been a great product. It was a really nice little thing. So I seemed to be good at it, woodworking. Kind of made a career out of it. So
then what happened? So that's closed up, and is that about the time that
closed up?
You took off?
I bounced around. I swung a hammer for a while, and then Berkeley was kind of crazy, and I was crazy too. Drugs were a real problem, and I had a wife who was a fiddle player and still is here in L.A. Candy Gerard or Lerman. Gerard. I'm not sure what her last name is right now, but we had a kid coming, and Berkeley was not a place, and we were not. We had to get away from our friends.
Got it. Yeah, I understand.
So we moved down to LA, moved in with my parents, which, oh my God, what a joy! And
I don't know how to take that, but
I took the tools that I had left from after the burglary at DNL, moved down to LA to my parents, rented a little tiny bay, and started a company. And it was just me and the hand router and the table saw that I had at DNL, which, by the way, still sits right here in this company. I started a company called California Wood Products. Now, my parents had been in the drapery business for RV companies. They made thousands and thousands of drapes for the RV industry that was big here in LA at that time. And so I had worked for them for a long time. I knew sort of the workings of that business. So I figured I'd sell to those same guys that I used to deliver to for my dad. And so I started a company, and I made those cup holders for RVs.
Oh, how about that?
And vans, remember before cup holders came in cars, you made them out of wood.
That's right. I remember that.
And I started that business. That business eventually became Sequoia Wood Products, and we had 200 employees.
So that lasted quite a while, didn't it?
That lasted about 16 years, yeah. And I was a very, very early adopter of CNC. I had 5 employees. This is 1988, I think. I had 10 employees. We were doing everything with pin routers and shapers. And I decided I'm going to buy a CNC router. Now, back then, CNC routers were extremely rare and extremely expensive. They were very costly. And my first one cost $163,000. Now, here I am, a little woodworking shop in Sun Valley with 10 employees. We were making furniture, too, at the time. Pine, foofy, grandma kind of furniture, pine farm style.
Right.
And I bought this CNC. Everybody said I was nuts. My parents couldn't believe I was going to spend $163,000 on a machine. But I did, and it came, and we learned how to use it. And we started running, and more we made speaker baffles for Sirwin Vega and Infinity and speaker parts for. Eventually, we made the entire speakers, and we became a big company, or bigger, 200 employees at its height.
That's pretty good size.
And 1,200 loudspeakers a day. That's built, cut from wood, built, tested, packed, and shipped. And so 1,200 a day at the height. And we were also doing slot machine cases and all kinds of displays and fixtures. So anyway, but the Coast Guard put me out of the slot machine business because they said, well, you can't have more than 3 pounds of combustible material on riverboats. And so wood is combustible, so see ya later. They had to be all metal. I lost the slot machine business, and at the same time, I lost our biggest account at the time, which was a speaker company up north that had bought Jensen and bought NHT and bought a lot of speaker companies, and they went belly up. That was owned by a company called Rekaton, who used to own like the cable business in Circuit Cities and all the electronic stores. Mm-hmm. So they went out of business. I lost the slot machine stuff both at the same time and couldn't recover. So I closed that business. Didn't bankrupt it, just closed it. And I had some furniture designs, and me and my wife worked on some, and we came up with an ergonomic kids computer desk that I had gotten the inspiration from other people. But we developed it, and I decided that if we were going to make it, I went into partnership with a very old friend of mine. It had to be done, couldn't be done in the U.S. It would be way too expensive. It wouldn't sell. So I decided, let's make it in China. Went there a few times, found the factory to make it. Very soon I learned that if it was going to be made anywhere near what our vision was, which was a very quality piece in quality boxes with quality instructions and everything done right. And this was for very small kids, and it would adjust both the chair and the table as they grew older. Mm-hmm. So you can make it bigger, make it fit. And we had all kinds of psychologists. It was a great idea, and so we were making it in China, and I had to be there to watch because there was no way they were going to make what we wanted. So I had to teach them how to make it, and I ended up spending more and more time in China and doing that. And then we developed we had a toy we were making. We had developed before. It was called Marble Train. It was a great little toy made out of a solid block of pine, and made that there. And pretty soon I learned Chinese, knew the ropes of the place. And then I convinced the guy who took over the building where Sequoia was. He was doing lamp cases mostly for companies like Roland and Tech 21 and many others. He was doing the woodwork and covering for amp cases. So he was an old friend, and I was doing side work for him.
You were doing this from China or locally?
I would come back and forth and back and forth, and I told him that he was, struggling like crazy, couldn't compete. Told him, hey man, if you want to make do this kind of manufacturing, there's no way you're going to be competitive here. So I told him, come with me one time. We'll go to Shanghai for 3 or 4 days, and I'll show you. And I did. And eventually we ended up building a factory in Shanghai, and I supervised that. I stayed there and watched the construction and hired the people and housed them. And I had to meet all the environmental and fire and spray booth regulations there, as we do here.
Right.
And yeah, everybody thinks it's a slam dunk. It's not such a slam dunk.
No, I've heard that.
And so built that factory, and then I ended up leaving there and going down to Dongguan to the original factory that had made our kid station furniture. Went back there, ran that factory, became general manager of the factory, and ran the whole thing. And that place had 500 people, and I was the only foreigner there. So guess how I learned Chinese?
Yeah, but sort of trial by fire, I guess. So let's talk a little bit about what you're in China. Let's talk a little bit about the history of LsL Instruments, which actually got its start in China.
It got, yeah.
But you didn't make any guitars there. Let's be clear about that.
No, I never made guitars there. I made lots of stuff there, but never guitars. Yeah. I've been to lots of guitar factories. I've been to hundreds of factories doing sourcing, but I was running this giant factory in Dongguan, and I was playing music at night, lots of nights, playing guitar in bands and drinking a lot, which you do in Asia, most of the world. And I was playing let's just say, not that great of a sounding guitar. And when I was playing in these lots of clubs, one of which was mostly an expat club, lots of furniture guys. Everybody was a furniture guy there. There was the guy from Ethan Allen, the owner of the bar was the VP of Bassett, and all the suppliers to these guys, all the Finnish companies, Sherwin-Williams, Axco Nobel, all these. It was a furniture dude hangout. Not everybody, but there were a lot of those guys there.
Wow, that's
and
amazing.
I was playing music. And we all hung out and played poker and drank a lot, and I played guitar in a band, several bands, and when I looking out there, I'm seeing these guys who were, every single one of them were making like 3 times what I was making, doing a heck of a lot less work. I mean, a lot less. A lot of their jobs, consisted of getting up in the morning, getting in a car, driving to some factory 2 hours away, pointing at stuff and saying no, and then getting back in the car and let's go get drunk. And so they're making a lot more than me. And I was busting 6 days a week in China at a factory. And, and it's hot and sticky. It's the tropics. So anyway, I'm looking at these guys thinking, well, maybe I ought to be doing that. So I decided to leave Pine, where I was working, Pinja, and I came back here, and I figured I'm going to get a cushy American furniture job because I spoke Chinese. I knew how to make this stuff. I would have been a great fit for a lot of companies and at a much better living, that's for sure. Because if I'm going to be in China, I might as well make a ton of money or some money.
Absolutely.
And I wasn't, before. So, hell with this. So I came back here, and I figured that while I'm looking for a job, I'm going to get myself a decent guitar to bring back that was better than what I had. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but let's just say it wasn't great. So, and I know the difference. So anyway, me and my wife are both woodworkers. We had those 2 table saws, his and her table saws in the garage. I figured, well, hell. First, I bought one on eBay, got totally ripped off by somebody for what was supposed to be a 73 Telly. I'd been in China. I'd never done eBay. I thought all the emails I was getting from eBay were really emails from eBay, and they weren't. Yeah. It was a total scam. I lost a lot of money, and I said, well, I'm not doing that again, so I'll just make one. So I went down to Cal Vintage, and I measured a 52 Telly. I had asked. I said, I used to hang out there because it was guitars, and I loved it, and it was a great place to hang out. And so I asked if I could come measure that 52 Telly. And they say, sure. They figure I'm coming down with a tape measure. I'm going to go, okay, that's it. Thanks, guys. That wasn't it. I was really going to measure everything. And they were like, what the hell is this guy doing? And I was measuring and measuring and measuring. Because they envisioned I'm going to come in with a tape measure. Okay, 3 inches, see ya. And it wasn't that way at all. I've spent hours
Wow.
And so I measured it. Now on the way out, Tommy K,
oh, sure,
who worked there at the time, is now at Imperial Vintage. But Tommy tells me, listen, if you ever finish it, bring it in. We'll have a look. I said, okay. It took me months and months, and I was flying around the country doing interviews with big furniture companies and hadn't found anything yet. And so I made all the jigs. I was determined not to buy anything I couldn't make. And so it was a lot of jig work because I didn't have a CNC there. I had to do it all by hand. And I made the guitar, and that first chord, and whoa, what? Do it again. And oh my gosh.
Sounded good.
And I started thinking, yeah, it sounded great. It was like day and night.
You strung it up for the first time and played it.
And so, and I couldn't believe it, because I'd go play that other one, and then I'd play, there's clearly a difference. But, you make something, you spend that much time putting your heart and soul in making this thing, of course you're going to think it's great.
Yeah.
So I didn't even believe myself. I said, it can't be really that good. But you know what? Tommy K, the guy at Cal Vintage, he'll give it to you straight. If it sucks, he'll tell you it sucks. And if it's great, he'll do the same. Tommy was a guy who I knew would tell me. And so I brought it into Tommy, and he starts to play it. And Tommy's an amazing guitar player. You could tell Tommy, hey, Tommy, play Moon River in B-flat country style. And he'd whip it off, and you going, whoa, my God. And, it's like the guy hadn't played a major chord in 4 years, So he's an amazing guitar player. But anyway, he would also tell you the truth. So I bring it in, and Tommy starts playing it. He looks up and he says, you made this? I said, yeah. You made the body? Yeah, Tommy, I made the body. You made the neck? Yeah, made the whole thing, Tommy. And he said, I'm blown away. Can you make another one? And I did. And he sold it in 2 hours.
And that was the beginning.
And the next one sold in 2 days.
That was the beginning.
Well, yeah, and that started it all. Yeah. And before I knew it, I was, oh my God, I'm having another company. And it sort of happened by a string of events that just pushed me into it. And it was almost like divine providence. Yeah, well,
probably, maybe it was. I mean, in some capacity. I mean, there's always puzzle pieces that come together. I've always kind of said that. But so you got a lot of encouragement. And did you create LsL, which we know where that came from, obviously. But did you create the company then, or did you start?
Well, that first guitar I made, my wife drew up a logo, put it on the front. I didn't ever want anybody to think that was a real 52 Telly. So my wife's a graphic designer. I asked her to make a logo. So we could put it on the back of the headstock, so nobody would ever think that this was indeed a real one. So I wouldn't do that. So we put the logo on the back of the first guitar, and then the second guitar and the third guitar. And next thing you know, what really did it was a friend of mine, Andy Brower, at the time was a prominent guitar repairman in LA, called me and said, listen, a friend of mine has 5 feet in a booth at NAMM that he needs to rent out. Are you interested? It's really cheap. And it was really cheap. And well, I haven't been to NAMM in years, and I was in the speaker business then. And okay. And we made it a little display, me and my wife, and we went down there with 5 or 6 guitars. And at the time, Avi Shabbat started working with me. He came and asked me to apprentice, and he worked for nothing for quite a while. But I taught him. And so we were making guitars and went to NAMM. And after 4 days, I had like 20 dealers in European and Japanese distribution. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this in the house, in the garage anymore.
Boy, I've heard this story a few times, but it's a great story. I mean, that's what happens.
Yeah, it's almost like I had no choice. I kept getting pushed into, all I wanted was one for me, I just wanted a decent guitar. And so, it was based on, as every guitar we make currently is, based on making it great, doing everything right. That's how you do it. You do everything right because, when it comes right down to it, we make the same shaped guitars as many others do, out of the same materials. How do you stand out given that you're doing exactly the same thing?
Well, that's a really very, very important point. And I wanted to just kind of ask you, and we can talk a little bit about this, because you've been running LsL now for over a decade. So tell me a little bit about some of the milestones that you can think of that have occurred along the way. Was there anything that kind of stands out?
Well, yeah, if there is one advantage for a guitar company to be in LA, it is access to musicians, great musicians that care about their instruments. And, everybody comes through here sooner or later.
Sure.
And so I met some really great musicians. Walter Becker was a friend from Steely Dan, and Carl Verheyen and Steve Trovato. Heck, when I was in China, I had a Steve Trovato book, and I didn't know who Steve Trovato was. And I had this book, guitar learning book, because that's what I do, is sit with a guitar and learn stuff. And I got to meet him, one of my guitar heroes. So meeting guys like this and being exposed to that is great. And Carl Verheyen certainly is an important one.
Well, he's good. I was going to ask you about that, and I usually don't ask those kinds of questions. But, we interviewed Carl a few weeks ago, and he did mention his signature guitar that is, in fact, made by you now. So maybe you could take this moment to tell us about that guitar.
That really was a milestone. It was something that, I didn't even know who Carl Verheyen was. I didn't know anybody in LA. I'd been in China for 8 years for the most part. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anyone here. And then I start meeting these guys, and I made Carl. Carl came by. I had no idea who he was, but he brought Steve Trovato. Steve Trovato, I knew, was guitar hero. But Carl, I made him a Telly and a T-Bone, and apparently he liked it. And I had, in the meantime, learned how incredible a guitar player he is, and a great guy.
Yes, he is.
And very accomplished. And so I had thought that, we came out with a S-style guitar, or Satakoi, mm-hmm. and, I thought it was good. A lot of other people thought it was good, but I thought that if I could make one for Carl, and if he liked it, because Carl's another one of those guys, if he don't like it, he ain't going to play it.
Yeah.
And he's not going to endorse it, certainly. I mean, you wouldn't get the time of day, because that guy, he's kept up at night by the sound of paint drying. He's got great ears, much better than me, and is an amazing guitar player and really hears everything. So I thought if I could get him, when he calls me for one of these, and then I'd really made a good Strat style guitar. And he did. About a year after he got his T-Bone from us, he called us up and asked if we were interested in doing that, because he thought they were good. So we did, and we developed this guitar with Carl. He'd come down to the shop a lot, and we based the neck off his 61 that he was playing. It's sort of a green Strat. And, went through multiple sets of pickups and configurations and settled on what he liked. And the way he likes it set up, too. We have a floating bridge. And when you pull up the trem arm, it stops at a minor third on the G string when you pull it up.
Wow. So
he's got a lot of interesting and, great improvements that he uses, low torque pots and the neck shape. That was really a milestone.
So did that become a model? I mean, it's his signature.
Yeah,
but
we make the CV special and have made it since then. Mm-hmm. And it's a great seller. It's a great guitar.
Do you, how do you promote it? I don't know whether I've seen it on your website or not. Is it?
We don't have money.
Yeah.
We don't really have much money for promotion or marketing or anything like that. Our best marketing is our customers. Mm-hmm. Thank God for them. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So,
but we do what we can with Carl. But he probably does more for us than we do for him.
Right.
We certainly sell a good number of Carl Verheyen specials, though. And being a small guitar company, manufacturing company, you have to be really good.
Well, that helps.
Everything.
That helps, and and you're.
Yeah.
And
well, it's essential. It's number one, because who the hell needs you otherwise?
Yeah, exactly. Right? Well, look, as we kind of get down to the end, I always like to close these interviews out with kind of a perspective sort of question. So I guess I want to ask you what you see as the biggest challenges in the industry today for builders like you, and secondarily, where do you think the business is heading in the future? And of course, that includes LsL. So you have the floor on that one.
Well, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is. We can start with the challenges.
Well, the challenges are always just making enough great guitars to pay the rent, without compromising. And that's always the struggle, because it is a business and the roof costs a lot of money.
Sure.
And we are in California, not exactly a business haven.
No, it isn't.
Especially manufacturing.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge. It really is an immense struggle. Just staying alive, and makes being great difficult sometimes. But that usually is longer delivery times. But we don't compromise on the guitars.
Yeah.
That's all we really have. We don't have a giant marketing budget, hardly at all.
Well, a lot of smaller builders don't, but you have to rely on things like social media and other types of things that don't have a big budget. So I see that you do a fair amount of that sort of thing. I've seen that.
Yeah,
that's helpful.
That's really the best thing about the internet is that you can be a small company. In the past, you had to have a giant marketing budget and sales guys, and starting a company would have cost a fortune. We started this on a shoestring from day one because the internet.
Yeah, but you've got I've seen your facility, and you're not a garage business. You've got a decent size facility there. You're a small company, but you have a nice facility. You've got equipment. You have a capability there. So it's really just you're in a tough business that's competitive, and you got all kinds of people working in that space. So you have to
managing employees is tough, and making sure that they're doing my vision, doing it correctly, that's a real struggle is making sure everything everybody does is right. Yeah. Keep an eye on 10 people at once and talk on the phone at the same time. And let me know how easy that is.
Yeah. So you're in that spot where, you don't have just like one guy working with you. You have overhead. I've seen it, so I know you have overhead, and but you produce a good product. People tell me, and for years they've raved about your guitars. So that's what people need to know.
Yeah, and they do. The guitars speak for themselves, and I drill that into everybody's head. We're only as good as the last one, and if you're making the same shapes and the same materials as hundreds of other companies, some of whom are really good, and you better be good, because the world will not tolerate a good guitar company anymore. You can either be really cheap or really good, but
the middle ground is a soft spot, probably.
It doesn't exist anymore. It's all overseas. Anything below really great is overseas. Mm-hmm. Believe me, I know. I have some experience in that regard. I could if I was in China, I could make this guitar better, I'm sure, but I'd have to be there.
Right.
And I wouldn't have access to all these great musicians and the LA scene, But the only way to do it, the only way to survive, is to do every single thing on a guitar right. and
you're doing that by having a lot of control over everything. I mean, you had told me at one point that you make a lot of the stuff for your instruments.
I still work.
Yeah. You're not outsourcing a lot of stuff, and
we don't outsource hardly anything. But now, we even make our own truss rods. Heck, my wife casts all our fingerboard dots at home.
Yeah, so that's a remarkable thing. I mean, look, tons of builders, I mean, they're sourcing lots of parts and things like that. And I mean, that's just one thing that sets you apart from other builders. And it doesn't mean other people don't build a good product, but you build a unique product. And it has your name on it, and people know that they're getting something that's that has the concern and the desire to, like you say, get it right.
We're certainly blessed to even still be here and to be able to wake up every morning and make guitars. And that's a great thing.
It is.
And everybody here, loves it most of the time. I could do without some of the business stuff, but we get up every morning and we get to build something that people think is important to them. A guitar is not a pair of shoes or a coffee table. People have special relationships with their guitars. And, we aim, fulfill that need. And I know what that need is. I wanted that too, and I got it. And so what we do is we stack up a bunch of pennies by doing everything right. And hopefully in the end, it ends up with, something that people love.
Well,
people don't love coffee tables. They love their guitars.
You've stated it. And probably the fact that you're still there, and you're still there after all these years, and you can get up each morning and go to work doing something that you enjoy doing, and every day is a new day. And we're going to keep in touch and stay on top of what's going on with LsL Instruments. And Lance, I really want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us today and to give us some real insight on your very, very interesting career and your road traveled so far. I think you still got a long way to go, and I hope for the best for you, and hope that you'll come back and chat with us again.
I'd be glad to. Thank you for letting me spout off. It was great being
awesome.
Doing it.
Yeah,
I love the sound of my own voice.
Yeah, and you'll be listening to it a lot. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Jeff. Nice talking to you.
Welcome back to the back of the show, where if you made it this far, you're probably willing to take a chance on unpredictable topics and discussion that you might not necessarily expect on a guitar-related show. So my interview with Lance was a colorful one for sure. I worked a little bit with him a few years ago, so I already knew something about his story, which of course is why, in large part, I wanted to bring him on the show. But a couple weeks ago, Carl Verheyen was telling me about his signature guitar, which is made by Lance's company, LsL Instruments, and that he might be someone we should talk to. So putting those two things together made it kind of a no-brainer. Now, one of the things I liked about this interview is that Lance is a pretty straight shooter. There's no pretense or strategic talking points. He lays it out pretty much on the line. But there were some seemingly mixed signals at one point. Like many of us, Lance's path to LsL Instruments was a winding road indeed, with ups and downs and sideways turns. There are some places later in the interview where it was kind of hard to tell if things were good or not so good currently. Now, you would think that saying anything publicly that could be in any way construed as bad news for a business would not be smart. But I happen to know that business is good for LsL and that their guitars are very well thought of. So I think it's important not to draw conclusions on tone or nuance. And I think that is the case here. And if you have any question about that, just ask Carl Verheyen. He'll set you straight on LsL. Like I said, there's no pretense with Lance, but man, I've seen my share of that in business, and I'm sure many of you have as well. Sometimes it comes across loud and clear like a storm cloud of BS. You can pretty much walk away from that without giving it too much thought. But in other cases, the polished line is so subtle that if you're not watching and listening very carefully for the clues, you'll miss it. And then you might just buy into the notion that something is when in reality it isn't. And again, I'm sure most of us have experienced that. Now, because I'm sort of a positivity guy, I always try to operate in the expectancy of the best possible result, knowing, as I've said many times, that there's generally more than one road to your destination. It's kind of like an automatic plan B or C that kicks in if plan A fails in some way. It takes practice, but when you get into the habit of thinking that way, it seems to result in better outcomes all the way around. The problem with negative thinking, from my point of view, is that it tends to create more of what we're thinking about. There's that old, very common saying, thoughts become things. I'm sure you've heard it at some point or some variation on that. And it's such a simple idea that it's probably dismissed by most people. Obviously, we've oversimplified. I don't think so. I mean, for the most part, we have a choice about what we think. That doesn't mean it's easy to wash away all the negativity that has been programmed and embedded within much of our lives, for most of our lives. But the truth is, folks, it only takes a spark to ignite a change in the positive direction. And small steps are okay. I can tell you from my own experience, when I was younger, before my current extended middle age experience, I used to spend an inordinate, easy for me to say, inordinate amount of time lamenting the past and wishing I'd done things differently. Or, as an alternative change of pace, I would worry about things in the future that would most likely never happen. All the time, I would be missing the most important thing, the here and now. So with that, I'm more than happy to offer you the same advice I close every show with. Stay positive, stay focused on your destination, and always keep all the options open on how you're going to get there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again on episode 28. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.